unstable. Okay, there we are. I think we're online. Alan here with our Discovering Buddhism course. Welcome, everyone. We've got people here and also maybe people online. Yes, at least one person online. So a new module tonight. This is the subject of emptiness, the wisdom of emptiness. Very deep topic. I feel extremely unqualified to teach it because I've had actually no experience of emptiness. But at least we've got excellent readings and good sources, which will help. And so I've sent out the notes for tonight and also the big bundle of readings, required readings, mostly with extracts of teachings by Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, two of each of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, and then Denma Locho Rinpoche, who I think is one of the gurus of Lama Zopa, very high Lama. So there's actually 2, 4, 6 sets of readings there. But the one probably we'll use most tonight is Seeking the Eye by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. That's got a really good meditation, which we'll do, on looking for how the I, the self, appears to us. And then there's also a big bundle of transcript from a teaching by Thupten Pende, who's a very high monk. I've never met him. I think he's based in America. Did you met him? No. He's based at one of the centres in America. So he actually taught the subject over a period of probably a month or so. And there's actually about 6 meditations at the back of that. So you've got a digital copy of that. Some really good meditations. So that could help. Then there's also a reading list. And I've got Practicing the Path, which is the one that's probably the one that we use most. Practicing the Path. This is the one by Yangtze Rinpoche. And that's the Lam Rin in one book for Westerners, mostly was taught in America. Yangtze Rinpoche is a monk in America, a Tibetan monk. Actually, that's a spare copy if anyone wants to know. Later.
I've got one.
Yeah. Have you got one yet?
It's really good.
I'm reading too many books.
Okay, that's all right. So I've got. That's all right. It'll go. Okay, so that's a good text to have. Then there's this book called Emptiness by Geshe Tashi Tsering. Geshe Tashi Tsering is or was the Geshe, the spiritual head of the centre in London, and Jamyang Centre, for many years, many years. And he actually wrote a book about, it's actually it's a book of his teachings of the subject of emptiness. So it's really good, very easy to read. How Things Exist by Lama Zopa. I think that's one of those free books, quite small and very easy to read. Lama Zopa. Virtue and Reality, another one of those small booklets by Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, fantastic resource, online resource, and many of their books are free by Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe. They specialise in Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe teaching, and also His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teaching. And the Essence of the Heart Sutra, that's a commentary by His Holiness the Dalai Lama on the Heart Sutra. There's some of these books actually I haven't read. They've just been put there by the people who designed the course. Praise of Dependent Rising, I haven't actually read that, by Geshe Santon. That's our Geshe in the centre here. So it's a collection of teachings he's given on emptiness. And I actually do have that, but I haven't actually got to read it yet. And Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand is kind of a standard text by Pabonka Rinpoche, the great high Lama from Tibet, who was teaching just before the Chinese invaded Tibet. He was giving a lot of teachings, and that book is like a not a transcript, but it's actually a summary of his teachings given to monks in Tibet just before Tibet fell to the Chinese. The Brush in the Palm of Your Hand. Fantastic book, quite advanced book, quite difficult. It was actually teachings given to monks, so they presume Bonka's Rinpoche's teaching to monks who've grown up as monks in a monastery. So that's why it's good to have these standard texts. It's also good to have the texts that are taught to Westerners, like Yangtze Rinpoche. He's actually teaching Western cultured people who haven't grown up in the monastery and haven't grown up with the belief in reincarnation and so on. So it's a different way of delivering. So we're so lucky to have such an amazing array of different books, really fantastic. And Lama Yeshe Ramsar, all their teachings are so digestible and easy to read. So even though it's a difficult subject, it's very difficult. So let's start by just doing our 5 minutes breath awareness meditation to calm ourselves. And we'll also talk a bit more about calm abiding meditation. That's actually part of the emptiness topic, insight and calm abiding meditation. Okay, so just get comfortable and we'll do our breath meditation. Okay, we're now just bringing our attention into our inner world, into our what's happening in our body, what's happening in our mind. Start with our attitude. Feel that we're now letting go of whatever the day was, whatever we did in the outside world, the busy day, the busy mind. Now we're turning our attention to our mind, taking care of our mind, looking after our mind, giving our mind a rest from all the discursive thoughts, feeling how fortunate we are to do some practice together, study the Dharma. Our motivation for studying the Dharma is not just for our own benefit, but benefit those in our life, and ultimately benefit all living beings. So now we're just coming to our body, get comfortable, check our spine is reasonably straight, shoulders relaxed. And then gradually give attention to our breathing, starting with the out breath. Feel that we're breathing out all the obstacles to our practice, all the tension in the body. All the discursive thoughts and chattering mind. And now just giving all our attention to the breath, the way the body moves with the breath. Nothing to change, nothing to control. Standing aside, watching and move into the body with the breath. We're also just checking our attention, whether we're still on the breath. That's called introspection. Watching for the wandering mind. It's part of the mind just monitoring what's happening. If we notice we've wandered off, that's okay. Just be glad we noticed. Let go of that distracting thought. Patiently come back to the breath. Full flow of the in-breath, full flow of the out-breath. Okay, just relax. So just a bit more about this practice of calm abiding or shamatha, meditation where we choose an object and we try and just stay with that object. So just leaving everything out of our attention except whatever it is we're focusing on. This one is just the breath. And so you can actually choose anything. A candle, quite often, more commonly, there's a visualized object, like a picture of the Buddha. We can look at a picture and then we can actually close our eyes and visualize. It's a bit more difficult than the actual breath. Or sound awareness is another one, just listening to sounds. Any one of the senses, sound, sight, or thoughts themselves, the mind itself, what's happening in the mind, that can be the object of meditation. More subtle, that one. So this type of meditation is used to sharpen our concentration. And once the end result, if you're very good at it, is that you can leave your mind on any object for as long as you like. So this is very, very high training. So you've reached samadhi. You can just leave the mind on whatever object you choose. So extremely difficult, and the practice itself is not exclusive to Buddhism. There's actually tradition of calm abiding meditation in Hinduism. I think in some other traditions, according to teachings given by His Holiness, it was around even before Buddha. The idea of placing the mind on one object, calming the mind. So that's so in the context of Buddhism, it's one of the three higher trainings. Three higher training: ethics. Ethics is our behaviour, our what we say, think, and do. Concentration and wisdom. Ethics, concentration, wisdom. So it'd be the three higher training. So concentration is this shamatha practice, and sometimes it's actually just said to be just being able to remember what we're doing. They're using the memory in a slightly different way. Normally when we say, did you remember something, you're thinking of something that happened in the past. But in fact, they say this practice is memory, remembering what you're doing, remembering that you're actually focusing on the breath. And then if we wander off, when the mind gets distracted, as apparently they've done studies for how the average person, not the meditation student, the average person concentration span on one thing is 8 seconds, according to some studies they've done in America with university college students. So don't feel bad if you find trouble. You're not alone. It's a difficult thing to actually rest the mind on one thing. So what happens is that the mind gets bored, it doesn't want to do just that one thing, and so it finds something else to think about. It's the distracting, that's the distraction. So that's what the mind, the job of the mind is to focus on one object, whatever we choose on. But then another part of the mind, little part of the mind is like spying. This is called introspection, checking what we're doing, watching to see whether we're actually on the object or not. Introspection. So we've got concentration and introspection happening. So the introspection is said to be something we just, because the mind is said in Tibetan psychology, say the mind can only do one thing at a time. So occasionally we just use the introspective mind to check what's happening. You know, how children are behaving. Are they actually on that topic or have they gone? So we might have to do that check very often in the beginning, and then as we become better, the mind's calming down. It's not quite. You can rest maybe for few minutes on one object, but you still have the guard watching what's happening. So that's shamatha, and it's said if you get perfect conditions, and you've got the right karma, because that's the other thing, you've got the right mental preparation, the merit, usually it's called merit, then you can actually achieve karma binding in 3 months if you've got absolutely perfect conditions. That means you'd have to be in a very beautiful place. Somebody would be looking after your food and so on, and doing nothing but. So very difficult for Westerners to have those perfect conditions. So Tibetan yogis may have had more opportunity to do that. It's very difficult. So we can still. So the purpose in shamatha, this idea of being able to concentrate on one thing, it's not necessarily a religious practice. It's how you can make it a religious practice by putting it in the context of why we want shamatha. Remember, the text always say you can be very mindful committing a non-virtue, like robbing a bank or planning a murder or something. You can still have perfect concentration. In fact, to do something, we need perfect concentration. We do something successfully. So it's not necessarily virtue, this ability to actually concentrate perfectly. But to make it virtue, we use motivation. Why are we doing it? Okay, so this motivation in this particular context, in the topic of wisdom, of emptiness, is to be able to use that calm, sharp mind to check reality, how things exist, how the self exists in particular, how the I exists. So that sort of meditation is called vipassana, or insight meditation, vipassana. Okay, so in Western context, they often use the word vipassana to mean calm abiding. So if you do a vipassana course, the Goenka course is basically using the mind to concentrate on one thing. It's not the breath. Is that what you're doing most of the time?
Bodily sensation. Bodily sensation.
Bodily sensation. Okay, so that's another object. What's happening in the body? So that can be another object. So then, after we've mastered this sharp mind, and we may not have achieved perfect. If we have achieved perfect concentration, then that sharp mind, that shamatha, sharp mind, can be used to penetrate and rest on how things exist, the wisdom realizing emptiness. And that's vipassana, using the mind to focus and stay on how the self exists, how we exist, how reality, how phenomena exist. So that's the use of this type of meditation. Without this perfect concentration, it's not possible to actually have the experience of the wisdom realizing emptiness. So that's once you've got it. We can have an experience of emptiness just in meditation without becoming fully enlightened, and then when we go out of meditation, we're back to our normal way of thinking. But to actually be able to stay in perfect concentration in a session and outside the session, as Buddha did when he became enlightened under the Bodhi tree, fully enlightened being, that's enlightenment. And once you've reached that, you've reached Buddhahood. It's as simple as that. Just attain perfect concentration and be able to focus on the wisdom relating the emptiness of all phenomena inside the session, outside the session, Buddha mind. So that's the ultimate. So to get there takes a lot of to be able to do what the Buddha did under the Bodhi tree. They say, I'm not sure how many eons of practice and rebirths. The Buddha was reincarnated so many times, so many eons, to build up all that mental force, that mental energy to become enlightened in Bodh Gaya, Bodhi. So it's all the practice that he did for that wasn't just done in the one lifetime, previous lifetimes, over many great eons. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, because once they say that even as a slight taste of the emptiness teachings, just a slight doubt about the way we normally misconceive reality as being something very solid and self-existing, even just cracking the foundations in a meditation has unbelievably good effects on our mind. So it's possible to start the process of achieving that great wisdom, realizing emptiness anytime in our practice. Yeah. What was that?
The funny thing is I was doing this as a child and I can't do it now as an adult.
Do you mean for past
well,
or shamatha?
Minutes, but I used to practice it as a child. It was one of my chores. Yeah, I used to use an apple or an orange, and I used to go and sit as part of my chores. And said to try and do it for 5 minutes, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I used to be able to get quite far with it because you haven't got as much going on as a child. And I find it really hard to meditate now as an adult. I find it much easier.
Okay, that's right. Just for people online, there's one of the students here said that she used to be able to meditate much better as a child because she started very young, which is fantastic. But now it's more difficult with all the commitments of life, work the day well. So
everything going on in the mess.
Yeah, but don't give up because we can still make headway understanding emptiness without having perfect concentration. Because we can use analytical meditation, we can use the intellectual mind to study the teaching. You've got to start with that. Very few of us will be starting with perfect concentration. So that's why we've got these amazing teachings and His Holiness Lamia Shilansa and so on. So we can use reasoning and our not perfectly focused mind to actually prepare the ground for deeper practices later. So this is what we're doing in this introductory stage. So that's what the Lamrim teachings are doing. These teachings on teaching, the Buddhist basic teachings. Remember the two wings of the bird, compassion and wisdom. Okay? So two wings of the bird needed to become fully enlightened being. Compassion, bodhicitta, for all sentient beings, and then the wisdom realizing the nature of reality, how things exist. Putting those together is what the Tibetan Mahayana teachings say we need to become enlightened beings. So we start the process, and hopefully, if we don't become enlightened in one lifetime, which is what some beings have, like Milarepa, then we've set up the courses to have good rebirths where we can come into contact with teaching and continue our practice in future lifetime. So just coming back now to the notes, you can see I started the notes there with Shantideva's quote on the place of emptiness in Buddhist teachings. All these practices were taught by the Lord for the sake of wisdom. Therefore, with the wish to pacify suffering, cultivate wisdom. So all the teachings ultimately have the aim of having the realization of wisdom, realizing emptiness. And so it's not an option, but it's necessary to have this realization of emptiness to become enlightened. So there's a little bit in your, particularly in the transcription by Thupten Penda, he talked quite a bit about this, the lineage of where these teachings come from and some of the great teachers. So I won't go into that too much, but Nagarjuna is one of the great masters teaching emptiness. If you see any text by Nagarjuna, that's the top source. Chandrakirti and the Sangha. And there's quite a good summary of the lineage of the teachings on emptiness in Yangshi Rinpoche's book, Practicing the Path. He's got quite a good summary there. So, so there's also the point there that study is not enough. Study is important. You need to study the teachings, the texts, use reasoning, analysis, logic, but we also need to do practices like purification practices to create merit. This is like composting the soil before we put the plants in. So doing some practices like making offerings, doing rejoicing, practice 7 limb prayers, making offerings, dedicating, rejoicing, etc. Purification practices to actually prepare the ground for the practice of the emptiness practices. So just for example, Lamsong Khapa, you'll see this in one of the extracts. I think Lama Zopa tells us that Lamsong Khapa, who was one of the great masters and actually said to have become Manjushri, like he became an enlightened being in his own lifetime. He did 3.5 million prostrations before he could start doing these advanced practices on emptiness, and made progress. 3.5 million prostrations, pretty incredible to be able to do that. So these preliminary practices are really important. Okay, so the other point is the 2 vehicles. Remember, there's the Theravada, the self-liberation practice, and then there's the Mahayana practice. So for both of those lineages, self-liberation, the Theravada practices, and also for the Mahayana practices, we need the wisdom realizing emptiness. Okay, so the difference would be the self-liberation practitioner is doing his practice and purifying his mind to escape samsara, to be liberated from samsara. Samsara being this state in which not a physical place, but it's a state where we're driven by what they say karma and delusions, like our karma delusions. We haven't got control as to our rebirth. We haven't got control of our future. So we can, because we're in samsara, we actually can be. We're also in this. We can suffer of 3 types of suffering: the suffering of being in a body, aging, getting sick, all that obvious suffering. We also have the suffering of disappointment when we're chasing these what is taught to us in worldly life as being pleasures, perfect good sensory pleasures, perfect reputation, things that most worldly beings would see as the end of their life, to have these material pleasures, that it won't actually satisfy us, and in fact will keep us in this cycle of suffering. So that's why these practices are designed to, the wisdom will take us out of the uncontrolled rebirth, where we actually just thrown from one reincarnation to the next, and not necessarily to one human reincarnation to the next. It could be less favourable animal, lower realms, and so on. So to get out of that, we need to practice wisdom realizing. We need to realize wisdom realizing. And to realize that, we need to put the groundwork down and study the teachings on emptiness. So, so that takes us to that. What's the source of the source of our problems? we basically did this in the previous module when we did samsara and nirvana. The source of all our suffering is karma and delusions. So karma is what we've done in the past, and we're having to, the effect of our negative actions in the past going to affect how we live now and how our life will be in the future. And delusions are the misconceptions. And the biggest one is ignorance. Ignorance, how things exist and how we exist. Okay, so that's the biggest, the driving force of all our problems is ignorance of how the ignorance of how things exist and how we exist, how the self exists. So this karma and delusions. They're both, karma is the effect of our deluded actions, and delusions are what we call ignorance. So, so the word ignorance comes up all the time, and it sounds, if you think about how we use ignorance in our Western, our sort of normal speech, it usually means not knowing a fact, like not being able to read or write, or being ignorant of how to garden, or ignorant of the legal system or some area that we haven't looked at in our life. So some gap in our knowledge. So that's not actually the way it's being used in this sense. This is like misconception. And so quite a good example in the Chupran Pende's transcript, where he says, simple example of misconception is if we think we've got $20 in our wallet and we've only got 10. We actually just looked, but we misread. We didn't see the colours or the notes clearly, so we actually underestimated how much money we have. So we mistook that due to some fault in the way our senses work. So, yep.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering, so ignorance, in our sort of our definition for it is rather like stubbornness, not to know.
For what?
Like for us.
Yeah.
And then misconception, or in this context, it's more like you misconstrue.
Misconstrue, that's it. So
one is like for us, you think it's just not knowing. Like there's stubbornness to know something. Like I refuse to know.
We're not even aware that we don't know something. It's the misconception. It's a bit like seeing like a mirage and thinking it is actually water in the desert.
Okay.
Okay, so we don't actually realise that it's just the light and a whole different set of conditions is actually coming into our mind, and we actually say, water. Okay, so this is sometimes used as an example. That's the kind of ignorance. We think, so when we relate it to phenomena and the self, how we exist. So usually it's easier to understand the selflessness of phenomena, the selflessness of the person than it is phenomena. So they usually start teachings with how we exist. Okay? So the misconception is that there is this person, sometimes called a self of persons. There's me, there's the body, definitely there's some body that exists. And then we know that there's consciousness, that we have thoughts, feeling. These are the five aggregates. We've got the body, which is the physical one. And then we've got these feeling, sensory perceptions, they call it volitional factors, that covers things like beliefs, emotions, and anything that's not in the others is in this category there. So there are actually one physical, which is the body, and then there's 4 different types of mental factors, and that whole collection is called the aggregates. And the misconception is we don't leave it at that. Okay, we put on top of that there's a person there, and we give it a name. Okay, or whoever we are. So that's the icing on the cake that's not there. That's the misconception, according to the teachings on emptiness. So it's putting the mirage is a good example. We've got all this light and heat and different factors, and we see what looks like water, and we label that water, and then we hold on to that. That's we grasp it. That's the grasping. Okay, so we don't realise that the mind is actually seeing something that's not there. Another good example is, the danger. They say don't throw everything out. It doesn't mean that there's nothing there, but it's not as we see it, not some independent thing that is actually existing. It's a label. Okay, the self exists conventionally. We know that something's here. There is something here, but the emptiness teachings say it's just a conventional way of. It's just a conventional me. When you put everything together, the body and the aggregates, the mental aggregates, we call that the self. We call that me, our. But there's not anything independent from its own side there. There's nothing independent from its own side. It's just a label. So it's that mistake by putting the label, putting a label there and thinking that it's real, that it's actually more than just a label. That's the mistake. And from that is all the this what they call duality. So if there is, and it's from birth. If you read the teachings by Lama Yeshe, it's a good place to start. I think it's the third reading. Lama Yeshe points out that it's so ingrained in our psychology, and every being has it, even animals, from birth. This sense that there is this self-existent self. So that means protecting. That means it's going to be put more importance on survival of that self than others, and so that's from that comes this feeling of me and them, and this dualistic way of thinking. So, so this is the object to be refuted. Okay, so we'll do this meditation later. So the object to be refuted is a self, something that's existing from its own side, and something that is separate on top of the aggregates, the body and the mind and the consciousness, something on top of it. So that's the object to be refuted. But so it's what we're doing is just taking away in the meditation of emptiness. You're taking away rather than saying this is what it is. You're just taking away that misconception. The other common example is you're walking along the road at night and you see a kind of thing that looks like a snake on the footpath. It's like twisting and sort of fear. This incredible fear. It looks like this huge snake across the road. But as you get closer, you see it's just a crack in the footpath. Okay? So you can actually dispel that fear and that misconception by just getting up closer and seeing what it is. So that's the use of the meditations, when we actually can rest the mind in how things really exist and experience emptiness, wisdom realizing emptiness. So this misconception, it can be eliminated. It's only a misconception, but it's not easy. So it's because it's been the way we've been thinking. If we worked out this and achieved wisdom realizing emptiness long ago, we wouldn't be still here in this human body. We'd be Buddha mind. We'd be liberated. We'd be liberators. So we've got incredible opportunity with the human body now, having met the teaching, having met teachers and the Dharma, to actually study the teachings and start to unravel this misconception. Okay, so this self has never existed in the first place. Never existed, but we've been holding on to this hallucination. Lama Yeshe often calls it hallucinated, the hallucinatory I. Okay, so what's the remedy? Just to realise that things lack these independent existence. So the highest teaching to help understanding this is called dependent arising. That things exist dependent on cause and condition, not independently. And it's really, I find it, if you start with the physics, how there is no independent atom. There used to be, the thought that there was a building block of all matter, which was the atom, and that was as far as you could go. But over the last 100 years, they've had quantum physics and so on. They found that there's actually no building block. You can get down into the particles, the atom, the protons, neutrons, and they also have further. There's nothing that's the last stop. The building block. There's nothing independent. So everything in the physical world is due to causes. So that's true at that quantum physics level. If we think about the more common example is a seed, like a tomato seed or an oak tree seed. So that seed is the cause of the tomato plant. Now, if you have a tomato seed, you're going to get a tomato. You're not going to get a cucumber. So that seed itself came from a previous tomato. It didn't come from nowhere. It's not sort of some self-existing seed. It's actually came from previous plants. Their seeds was harvested. They came from previous plants. So there's an endless connection of cause and effect with tomato seed. Then you put the seed in the soil and give it the conditions to grow into a new plant, water, nutrients, and so on. So again, what seems to be a tomato plant 100% there in front of us is just there because of all these causes and conditions, dependent, not independent, but dependent on the sun, the water, and so on. They can take away the causes and the thing disappear. Take away one cause, like the water, and the thing will die. So these sort of examples are quite helpful to the idea of dependency, not independence. So dependent arising is the way it's usually called in the text. It's really said to be one of the best ways to help our mind understand emptiness. Okay. See if there's anything. It's interesting. Someone's just put a comment, good morning. So you must be watching in a different part of the world. That's Alex. Hello, Alex. Good to see you there. Okay. Great. So, this phantom self, I think Lama Zopa or Lama Yeshe calls this the phantom self, is either seen as a separate or partly separate from the body and mind. So, so the actual meditation that helps sort of break this down is how the I appears, how the self appears, which I'll just introduce. It's actually really good. It's actually what Lama Zopa actually teaches in that the second or third reading. So if you want to do it at home, you can actually just follow those. I'll just get the reference for you. It's Seeking the I on page 9 of the readings. So I'll just read a little bit of what Rinpoche says, Lama Zopa says. So he said, wisdom recognized that such an autonomously existing I, the word self-existing, autonomous, independent, there's a lot of different words that mean the same thing. Autonomously existing I is totally non-existent, and thus by wisdom, ignorance is destroyed. So it's said in the Buddhist scriptures that to realize correct view of emptiness, even for a moment, just one sort of second while we might be doing this meditation, how things exist, shakes the foundations of samsara, just as an earthquake shakes the foundations of a building. So how does this, it just gives a little bit more about how this instinctive self that we carry around with it is there all the time. He says we wake up in the morning and think, I have to make breakfast, or I have to go to work. So there's this powerful thing, intuition at the back of our mind, that there's this person who needs breakfast, this self-existing I needs to go to work, needs to earn money, and so on. So we cling to this mistaken belief. The other thing that the I arises, if somebody criticizes it, say you're stupid, then you get this, how dare you say that for me? You know, somebody insulted me, I was offended, I. So the I is usually not sort of at the forefront in our everyday life, but we can actually check the times when somebody criticizes us and we get upset. The other time is if we are in fear, like we nearly died. I was in an accident, I nearly was run over by the bus, nearly fell off the cliff. So there's this sense, you can actually see that there's this I arising, that the I that was nearly destroyed, nearly killed. So the other time is when we're praised. Somebody said, "Oh, you're so fantastic." The pride arrives with the I. If you just sort of check back, it does happen. If you've ever been falsely accused of something, that can be quite shattering. Somebody says, you stole the money from so and so in public. You're sort of shamed in public, and you didn't. So there's this feeling of indignation and so on. So these are good times to just check on this sort of arising of this latent self that we're trying to question and look at and actually negate. I'm just going back to Rinpoche. It says, it appears most vividly in times of strong emotion, when we're mistreated, when we're abused, if we experience an earthquake, or if a car or plane nearly crashes, a terrified I invades us, making us oblivious to everything else. Strong sense of I arises when our name is called. So this is another one, when the name is called. That name sort of wakes us up. If you hear a name, somebody's just, and then suddenly we might be eavesdropping and somebody says something about, they're talking about me, the I, they're saying something bad. So that makes us particularly keen to hear. So, the other really good example Rinpoche uses, in one teaching I remember, he said that the baby that's just been born and hasn't been given a name, and the parents are wondering what to call the baby. And so you've got a form, they've got the body there, baby, you can see the baby, touch the baby, crying, but it hasn't got a name yet. So that unknown baby is then given a name, and so it's called Sarah, baby girl. As the name sticks to that collection of body and mind over the weeks, months, people get more and more used to the idea that that baby is Sarah. That collection of what we see and touch is actually Sarah. So the Sarah becomes much, much more stronger, as if there's not just that baby without the name, but there's actually a real Sarah there. If you think about that, It's actually quite profound. So it's something that we've added. There wasn't a Sarah before. There's just a baby with what is necessary for the baby to exist. But now we've actually added, and as the years go on, the Sarah, the people who call the person Sarah thinks that there's a real Sarah there, and the Sarah herself, she's actually, I'm not just this, but I'm Sarah as well. Okay, so it's quite a good example. So the other example is just using Rinpoche, I think the letter A uses it. I remember him teaching this for maybe an hour or two in one particular teaching. You know, the 3 lines that make A, there's actually 3 lines if you use a capital A. So that the person who didn't know how to read just sees these lines. He doesn't know, has never been told what those lines mean. So they see like a collection of lines. Maybe it looks like a house or something like that. So it's when you put on top of that this is an A, you've actually got to put a label on what is something. It's just a visual representation. And so we actually believe, once we sort of always conditioned to think that structure of lines is actually an A, we see the A there, not just the lines, but we see the A. So these are just examples to help us understand how the idea of a self is put on top of this collection. It takes a while. It's because we've got this misconception so entrenched. We need to sort of keep reading different teachings, different ways, different examples, and I think it definitely does help to over time. If you start thinking, well, maybe that's correct, maybe there isn't sort of anything on top of this collection of aggregates. Then slowly over the years, usually, for me anyway, you sort of start to doubt. You're still carrying around this instinctive sense of, Alan, or the person you are, waking up in the morning. But because you've had these teachings and maybe done some meditation, there's more of a doubt, and the doubt is very healthy, they say. It shatters the foundations and makes a huge difference in our future study. Okay, so then a little bit about not going to the opposite extremes. So these 2 extremes are eternalism. Eternalism means that there's this me who is always going to be here forever, always has been, always will be. This idea, probably a little bit like the soul in Christianity. That's the way I sort of relate to it sometimes. That there is this impervious, unchangeable. Actually, I think it's also in Hinduism, the Atma or soul. In Hinduism, that there's this something that is completely indestructible, existing from its own side. So, so that questioning that and using these different reasoning can really help to soften that instinctive sense. So, so the extreme is probably the way we start off before we start studying the teachings on emptiness, that there is something definitely here that's not just body and mind, something on top. And the other extreme is, the teaching is empty, just means there's nothing. Okay, we just throw everything out. There's no me, there's no good, bad, there's no reincarnation, there's nothing. So that's called nihilism. So that's the other extreme to avoid. So these are possible things that we just need to be aware of, that both of them are wrong according to the teaching. Okay. So now, also Rinpoche says in this extract, only 3 pages, but definitely worth reading. He says, if you actually start to do the meditation and it's going quite well, you're actually questioning, who is this I sitting on the cushion? You could either feel great joy, because the hallucination has dropped, and you just see that there's actually just there's no duality. There's just this existence, non-dual, and that's joy. Or there's a fear, joy or fear. He says is showing that you're successful in the practice. Okay, so the fear could be, gosh, I'm not, that thing that I thought was there is not there. So there's this feeling. You can actually, in probably a very mundane way, that people talk about when they do maybe extreme sports, they say there's a sense of self, because you're so focused on whatever it is, rock climbing or whatever, that sense of self just goes for a few seconds. You have some joy. Maybe if you've done something that some hobby, could be photography or something that involves incredible concentration, you have these times where you just lose yourself. They use the expression, I just lost myself, and I was just so engrossed in what I was doing. So these experiences can help. Could be fear, could be joy, could be just a relief that the hallucination has dropped. There's no need to fear that the conventional I has disappeared. It's merely a sensation arising from a glimpse of the false I's unreality. Okay? The conventional I still exists, because we still exist in that way. There's still the aggregates there, but you've just dropped the false I, and that's a glimpse of that joy or fear. This is the way Rinpoche describes it. So with practice, the meditation will bring about a gradual dissolution of our rigid concept of the I and all phenomena. We no longer be so heavily influenced by ignorance. Our very perceptions will change and everything will appear in a new and fresh light. Closely examine the objects, such as forms that appear to your sixth consciousness, analysing the way in which they appear to you. The bare mode of existence of things will arise brilliantly before you. He's just quoted from a text that he hasn't given the set. Okay, so he's going from this sense of losing the self. You can apply that to the phenomena, the things that the outside world that we are so sure were there before we did meditation, and they also lose their concreteness, their sense of hardness and existing from its own side. Okay. Let's do the wisdom. This is how the I appears meditation. This is one I do quite often in our Friday drop-in meditation class, I've already given the introduction. I'll just see if I've just missed any of the points. We're avoiding the two extremes.
What's the thief?
What was that? Yeah.
Last point.
Yeah, last point.
It said the thief, not the thief. Identifying the thief.
Oh yes. Okay. In the notes, the thief.
Yeah.
Just a sort of small point. That thing I've got written there under the concept of no self. It's actually a repeat of what is earlier in the notes. So I haven't edited it properly. So under that, identifying the thief, we need to examine on a day-to-day how the I appears to us under various conditions. So that's it. That's identifying the thief is the object to be negated, the misconception. The object to be negated is that there is this definite me in here somewhere. Right? That's what we're looking for. That's said to be the thief who is in the house, but we can't see them. You sort of the thief is the hallucination, I suppose. What was?
Oh, I just see.
So because they're coming in now. So I'm sort of like looking ahead.
It's probably not all that good analogy of thief, but they take away our wisdom because it's something that we're probably frightened to let go of. The idea that there's this real person here. very good in sort of everyday life to see how much the real person is going on behind.
It's easy to negate the people when you're feeling pain, but I think it's I got from a Vipassana retreat. It's easy to negate when it's the I, intellectually, when you're feeling pain, but noticing it when you're feeling pleasure.
Yeah.
And that's like, I feel good.
Who is the I feeling the pain? Was that becoming part of the practice?
No, it's like you're not supposed to, because create desire you're desiring, because by craving something pleasurable, and you're also aversing something that's negative.
Yeah.
Either way, the I is still wanting to experience
pain or pleasure.
Yeah, pain or pleasure. And when it's pleasurable, we tend to like for example, I think I heard from Pema Chodron, when we were like sitting in meditation. Also, we would joke about when we're having a bad session of meditation.
Yeah.
Didn't we know that any session of meditation is a good thing, wholesome action?
Right.
But it's like I want a good meditation session.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just for people who they probably can't hear you.
Okay.
So people who are online, there's James, one of our students, is saying that if you're meditating, the I can come up as judging whether you're doing a good session or not, and whether you're annoyed. Or, so this wanting a good session.
Good and experiencing pleasure and experiencing.
That's another way the I can be there.
I think it's hard to let go of the idea when I'm experiencing pleasure. Like, this is a good song of music, but remember that I is take up the I and just listening to music. That's it.
Wanting a perfect session, that's very much the ego in a way, because I want to be a perfect meditator. I want to be good. I want to be good. I want to stand out. So there's still building up something rather than just experience something.
Yeah.
You're trying to be better than everyone else, maybe, or better than your previous personal best or whatever.
I think the big funniest thing I've ever learned from my Zen teachers is doing Zen is to become dumber.
Dumber.
To be dumber, yeah. Because sometimes, I'm guilty of that. I think I've got really time. I like to be that spiritual teacher in the room.
One thing that Lama Yeshe always emphasised is you need to sort of get behind your intellect. Especially Westerners always making fun of how they think they're so smart because they've got university degrees and so on. So he sort of makes fun of that. Just that can be part of it, and wanting to be the best at whatever meditation you're doing. So that's still involving the I. It's not really doing the practice.
It's ego trips, whatever's your go.
Just be less competitive. Just do it. And if you have a good session, great. Don't sort of want more. Be greedy like you want more chocolate. But if you have a bad session, that's okay. So maybe next session will be better. But just accept it. Whatever. Be unambitious. I think if you do a lot of just mindfulness meditation, that you sort of, if you do have a good experience just now and again, it keeps you going because you just realise there's something bigger than what you can measure. Something that the mind is just starting to, as Alan Watts would say, be in its natural state, sort of just like starting to expand and just be the way it should be, without all the chattering and the competition and ego and so on. So that's just experience. There's nothing like experience. All right, so we'll do this, how the I appears. And I will quote a few words from Lama Zopa during the session. So we start off just getting ourselves comfortable as we would for breath meditation. Just watching the breath for a few moments, calming the mind. So we start with our meditation on how I appears, our me appears, just sitting here, meditating, checking. Do we have a sense of I now sitting on the cushion, sitting on the chair, in the room? Can we feel me here? A sense of self. Sometimes if we're in a calm, relaxed state of mind, it's hard to see the me, hard to find it. So to help us, we can actually think of a situation where there was a strong sense of me, self. So it could be, say if we've been criticised, somebody said something bad to us, harsh words, could have caused us to feel angry, resentful. I was her. She said that to me. Another possibility is when we pray, someone gave us a high rating or said really kind words to us and we felt this I arising, sense of pride. The ego liked the words, liked the praise, makes us feel comfortable, reassured. I was very happy. The praise, they acknowledged me. Another possibility is if we're in a life and death situation or we were frightened, that sense of fear that we could have been hurt or killed. We're looking at the sense of self, not the situation, not the facts, but the sense of me. Allow that sense of I to arise and just watch, just watch. So the next step is to investigate if we can find the sense of self. Let's start with the body. Can we find it in the physical body, the brain perhaps, the heart? Usually we touch our heart center when we talk about me. Is there a physical I sitting in there somewhere? The abdomen. Thinking of the body as a collection of cells and atoms. Constantly being renewed and changed. Can we find a self, a solid, eternal self in the body? To help us. If we still think there's perhaps a self, maybe in the whole body, that means if we just lose part of the body, we lose part of the self. If we lose our hair, our skin, part of me is being lost. If we lose a limb, we've lost part of ourself, if the self is in the body. How much of ourself can we lose, our body can we lose, and still have a self? We can't actually find a solid self in the body. Let's look in the mind. Look into our conscious mind, stream of thoughts, memories, images, feelings, emotions. Can we pinpoint the self in that stream of ever-changing mental factors. The feelings, is it the real me, the happy me, the sad me, the neutral me, the patient me, dissatisfied me? We find an unchanging self in the mind, in that ever-changing flow of stream of consciousness. What about if we can't find it in the mind or the body? Could the self be something just outside the mind? Could the self be something just outside the mind or body? Something that's just above? Is it possible? And yet, we still can say, I am meditating. I am sitting in the room at Vajrayana Institute. That makes sense. There's something here. What does it mean? I'm sitting on the chair in the room now. That the I exists from its own side, we create the root of samsara, ignorance. The more we analyze the way the I exists, the more we can see it exists dependently, not independently. Dependent on causes and conditions. Now coming back to the beginning of the meditation when we were looking at the sense of self sitting in the chair in the room. Any change in how we view the sense of self, having done the meditation? Any loosening or doubting? It said that just doubting the existence of this non-existent self cracks the foundations of samsara that causes all our suffering. So we'll just end meditation by just dedicating any positive merit, positive imprints on our minds from tonight's session to our development of understanding the wisdom realizing emptiness. And also just reading dedication from the Lama Zopa during the pandemic. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sickness. May all the sickness in the world, without exception, of all transmigrating beings, never occur again. May all wars, sickness, famine, torture, poverty, and economic problems in the world, and all dangers of earth, water, fire, and wind be pacified immediately. May perfect peace and happiness prevail in everyone's hearts and minds. May the Buddha Dharma last for a long time, and may sentient beings in the world meet the Buddha Dharma and achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. Last. Okay, I'll just say good night to the people out there in cyberspace. So thanks so much for being there. Hope to see you next week, and have a good night and good week.